Welcome back to Other Duties as Assigned. We're on location today, not by design. I got too busy before we took off for fall break, and I needed to film one of these episodes while we were down here at the beach as a family, and got up a little bit early this morning and got a chance to work on a podcast here for you, and really felt like, a lot of times I plan these out and then I pivot at the last minute because something else happened and made me think about, kind of where we are in the world of my first year as a administrator and what can I share from it? What have I learned? That's always been the kind of the purpose behind this podcast, was to share lessons because, that's something that's really, really important to me. So today, it's morning time, sunrise on the beach. There's a lot of things that kind of could be going through my mind. One of them was productivity. And it's funny that I should be doing it when I'm resting and recovering on the beach with my family. But I think that's an important part of this because I think it does matter. You see a little sand, a little bit of ocean there over my shoulder. Here's some birds. That's where we are. We're outside here at the beach. And, I start to think about, how important it is to stop and reflect and refresh. And I think that's important. I think finding the rhythm to our work is very important because you can't always be on. You can't be doing this job correctly and well and do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I think that's the kind of the biggest takeaway. And I'm going to get into some real specific things, just some little things that I've learned that have just made me a little more productive here in the last few months. But I think, you have to find time to turn off. And vacations are important, and whether they're staycations or vacations, they help you reset. I personally, as an administrator, like getting out of town. Getting out of town has allowed me over the years to truly turn off the work part of my brain. When I'm still in town, it's inevitable. I run up by school, either a kid at a practice or go up to grab something out of the office, and 30 minutes becomes an hour and you really don't turn your brain off. So, this time I'm going to be away for, 9 straight days of not being in the office. And I think that's really good. And I encourage people to take time for that. As the leader of your building, one of the things to remember is when you take time for yourself, when you rest, you give permission for everybody else to rest. And I think that's really important as a leader, is to think about that. Early on in my administrative career as an assistant principal, if I was working on something at 11 o'clock at night or 4 o'clock in the morning, which I unfortunately used to do a lot of, I would send emails at those times to staff. And I thought, hey, they're going to really see how hard I'm working. But what I wasn't doing was valuing their time because, I would press send on an email and walk away. They're getting that email at whatever time at night or in the morning that maybe wasn't the right time for them to get it in terms of what they needed to do. So I've been really trying to be more thoughtful about that. It doesn't mean I don't slip up and send something early or late, but I try to use the schedule send feature. If you use Gmail, when you go down to schedule, there's a little arrow. You choose schedule send and send it during the work hours, or at least send it in that hour leading up to, that's when people do have time. And really that's, teaching that culture of this is when we check email. I try not to send emails at 5 or 6 o'clock at night to staff because, again, that's not the time that makes sense for me. I think if you take time on vacation, you also need to take time in your daily routine and your weekly routines of, giving yourself some time on the weekends, giving yourself time away. It's a busy job. You have a lot of things you're responsible for as a school administrator, whether it's supervision of sporting events or going to a choir concert or band performance or whatever outside the school day, you're busy. But if you find time, if you have time, most importantly, you need to make time and give yourself a time in little doses to get what I'm getting this week by turning my brain off and walking away. A couple little takeaways. Here's some really meaningful, quick things. First one is calendar. Use your calendar during the workday to make time for events. A lot of times people are looking at my calendar to schedule time to work with me. And so what I've tried to do is, if I know there are things I need to be working on, I put those in my calendar at the beginning of the week or even a week ahead. Hey, I've got this project I'm working on. I've got this presentation I'm doing. I'll block off hours or 2 hours in my schedule. And what that does is people aren't looking to use that time to schedule meetings with me for other things. And those will still get booked. We'll still get them. We'll still make them happen. But by me dedicating time in my schedule to have that happen, makes it happen. And I think that's really important. I've learned I'm a Google Sheets, Excel spreadsheet kind of guy, and I've learned that I can also mass upload calendar events. So in the way we do teacher observations in our building, I'm in every teacher's classroom, which will amount to about 88 observations this school year. And so that's a lot to think about, 88, 180 school days. How am I going to make that work? And so what I did was I created a calendar back in July, and I scheduled everybody out as to who's going to do, just a schedule. How am I going to get my primaries done, in the first 10 to 12 weeks of the school year, and then I'm going to go into my secondary evaluations and just try to get them done. And my goal was to have them all done before spring break. And so I built the schedule out that way. I made it doable. I didn't put 10 on in a week. I did, tried to do about 5 every week to get there in a reasonable amount of time. And then using Google Calendar, there's the ability to import calendar events. So I could use a template, and in my spreadsheet, I put everybody down. I put in when their prep periods were, when they are teaching, and then I kind of scheduled them out. And then I saved some weeks for myself. I have a short week for Thanksgiving. I'm not going to do any that week. Hey, we've got this 2-day event on this week. I'm not going to schedule. And so by doing that, I could then have space to, if I did have one that didn't work in my schedule or something came up, I knew I could bump them into those spots, do a 1 off here, 2 there, to keep doing that. I think that's been really good for me in terms of planning, but also, that's a big, teacher observations, classroom observations are super important to understanding your building, and you have to make time for them. However, they never feel like an emergency. Like, man, I have to get in the classroom. The problem is if you keep putting them off, you'll never get them done. And so I think that's really important. This one I just picked up in a book recently, and I think is a huge hack for productivity, and that is, I am very guilty of having a million tabs open on my browser when I'm working in my office. I've got my email, my calendar, just all the way across the top. And one of the things I started to do is when I've got a project I need to work on, hey, I need 45 minutes, I can knock this out, we can get it all the way done. Maybe it's an email I'm drafting, maybe it's some kind of a video I'm working on for families or whatever. What I'll do is I'll close my browser and I'll open a browser and just open up maybe the tab or 2 tabs that I actually need for that project. And then I'll go do that. And I won't be distracted by email, won't be distracted by calendar, won't be distracted by anything else, or try not to be for that amount of time. And usually I'll set a timer and try to keep myself on task. But man, by getting rid of all those other tabs and just having open what I need to work on, I'm super productive. And it really helps me stay focused. I am super guilty of, the book referred to it as popcorn brain, of just jumping from one thing to the other. I'm 10 minutes into a project and I think of something else and I go do that other thing. What I've started to do is keeping a Post-it note on my desk or a 3x5 card. And when I get going on something and I think of something else, I don't want to forget it. So I make a note of it, but then I keep getting back on task and try to stay focused. And that's been really good. Don't sleep on AI. I've talked about this in several other episodes. I'll link them in part of the bio here or the description of this episode. But man, AI is really helping us use our time better and be able to focus on the things that we want to focus on. Use them to help me draft emails and messages, helps me to just work on other kind of synthesizing of documents. Hey, I've got these 3 documents. I'm trying to find something, and they can be 80-page PDFs, but man, it can help me really synthesize and help me get to what I really need to in that information. I think that's been really good. Here's an easy one. I picked up a little trick. I got a document the other day, and it had, I don't know, maybe even 30 different events that were coming up this calendar year, this school year, pardon me, that I was going to need to be at, and had the times and what it was, but just thinking about getting all of that into my calendar. And this person who gave this piece of paper out, she wasn't sending calendar invites. That's not her thing. And so I saw my brother snap a picture of it and say, "Oh," I said, "what are you doing?" Thinking maybe he's just saving a copy or sharing it with his wife or whatever. And he said, "Oh no, I'm going to use AI to create the calendar events." And I was like, mind blown. I'm like, that's amazing. What a super hack to speed up the process. And sure enough, took the picture, uploaded it into ChatGPT, which is the one I use more than most, but could have used Gemini. I think that's the one he was using. Could have used Magic School and Raina. You could use any of those tools, Claude, and say, hey, I need to create calendar events, and probably less than 90 seconds, I add a file to upload it to my Google Calendar, just kind of like I do the mass upload before, and all of those events perfectly into my calendar without me having to go one by one. I think that's really important. In closing, I would just, I'm a little long-winded this morning. I have lots to think about when it comes to productivity. I think it's important to kind of keep your time off sacred. One of the things that I picked up in the book that I'm going to do and have started to do is turning off notifications. I use the Focus feature on my iPhone to when I'm at work, turn off notifications that don't have to do with work. And then when I'm at home, turn off notifications that have to do with work that I don't really need on an instant basis. Nobody is going to email you that there's a fire in the building. You don't need notifications for your email. Check them a couple times a day, check email a couple times a day. Anyone who sends an email and expects an immediate response doesn't understand how email works. If they need you and it's an emergency, that's a phone call. And I think that's really important. If you can kind of get your head around that, man, you can do really good things in terms of just protecting your time. As I'm sitting here, I just want to remind you again, to take time to pause, to recharge, and that allows you to come back and be your best leader and to be your best self, is to take those times, whether it's during the school day, during the school week when you're not on vacation, but also taking these dedicated time away. I think it's really important to find that rest, to find that rhythm, so you can keep doing great things in your building. So, this is your permission to take time to rest, but it's also your permission to continue to try to find ways to do your job more efficiently and effectively so that you can rest and you can feel good about taking that time away. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.